So there's a certain feminist YouTuber, Laci Green, who has kind of taken a step back lately and been saying some less feminist things. And the reaction she's gotten from feminists has been cruel, unfair, shrill, and this is substantially the reaction that anyone gets who disagrees with feminists about anything. And, I've made a video about women voting and why I think it's unstable and therefore undesirable. And there are other reasons I oppose women voting, mainly because I don't like any of the things that women vote for, or where women's vote systematically differs from men's votes. I don't like gun control. I don't like abortion. I don't like gay marriage. I don't like refugees. I don't like no-fault divorce. I don't like, our family court system that are biased towards women and alimony and child support and child custody and any of that kind of stuff. And therefore I don't like women voting, because that's all stuff that women vote for. And if you were an intelligent and reasonable feminist, maybe you could argue that some of those things are actually good ideas, like maybe their benefits outweigh their costs, at least, sometimes, in some ways, in some cases. But feminists never make that argument or any similar argument. They just shriek and they nag and they scold and they shame and they ridicule and gossip and rally, and just generally be really unpleasant people. And these means together are called the feminine means of coercion. They're a form of social and emotional coercion, where the point is to raise the social and emotional cost of disagreement in order to force you to relent. But they're dishonest means because they are independent of truth or truthfulness or the truth value of any claim. You can use these means to support any claim by attacking any other. Okay, so these are totally independent of truth, and they're not honest debate tactics. They're not honest discussion tactics. They're the feminine means of coercion. They're analogous to the masculine means of coercion, which is violence. And you could say that violence also is independent of truth, as such. But that's not entirely true. It's not entirely independent, because violent coercion depends on strength, and strength depends on a variety of things: honor, loyalty, industry, production, group cohesion. And all of these things depend to some extent on truth. Truth is a prerequisite for group cohesion and loyalty and honor. And so there is some sense in which masculine coercion is dependent upon truth, and so it's not entirely independent of truth. It may not be directly related in every instance, but there's a connection, however indirect. And so, the feminine means of coercion, on the other hand, are entirely independent of truth because they don't depend on strength. All right, and so they're the tools of the weak. And that's what we see them being used by, women, minorities, social justice warriors, and Jews. Various marginal groups who are not powerful use the feminine means of coercion to get their way, to force you to submit to their dictates and to their demands by raising the social and emotional cost of disagreement. And so, this is, Laci Green's getting a taste of this right now, and I hope this is enlightening for her, because, this is what her sestern have been dishing out for a very long time, the entire history of feminism, going all the way back to the suffrage movement. This is how they've gotten their way, and it's not by arguing rationally, it's not by arguing costs and benefits, it's not by arguing truth, or criticizing untruth, but just by shrieking and pointing. And it's not productive. It's parasitic. These are lies. They use these methods to sustain lies, because you don't need these methods to sustain truth. And so if they can sustain truth or lies, these methods are going to be preferentially employed to sustain lies, because truth can be sustained by other means, whether rational discourse and rational debate, or violence. So feminism, I think, has been a very bad thing, a very corrosive thing, and a very parasitic and destructive thing to our civilization and to our society. And these feminine means of coercion are a big part of why that is. And the way that people debate feminism and feminist points, debate's really a charitable word, using these feminine means of coercion, which are the tools of the weak and the dishonest. People who can't get their way by other means. People who can't get their way by violence, who can't get their way by reason, who can't get their way by negotiation or exchange, by offering something of value, because they have nothing to offer. So these are all ways of getting what you want. And, people who can't use any honest or productive ways, and there are many, or who can't even use violent coercion, because that does depend ultimately on honest and productive ways of creating, wealth, which translates into power, and cooperation, which translates into power. Then they resort to these feminine means. And, that's why feminism is so terrible, and everything it creates is terrible. And, hopefully this is enlightening and illuminating to Laci Green and to others who have questioned or contradicted feminism and received this treatment. And, maybe it's an eye-opening experience. We can only hope. So, and these feminine means of coercion are kind of analogous to Pilpul, which is the Jewish means of disputation. And it's kind of the same idea. You raise the cost of refutation rather than addressing the points of contention. And you can raise the cost of refutation by a variety of means. Mainly, Pilpul is a word which means to pepper. And it basically just involves blowing a lot of rhetorical smoke. Hair splitting, throwing red herrings, straw men, twisting your opponent's words, and, basically doing a lot of other stuff, dishonest stuff, to gain the upper hand, the rhetorical upper hand, by raising the cost of refutation rather than addressing the point. And, this is basically the entire Jewish method of disputation, or Talmudism, where, they have this book, the Talmud, which is 6,200 pages of, nonsense, basically. And all it boils down to is the law can be whatever you want it to be if you are clever enough. And they have all these, clever arguments about how the rule in the Torah about throwing away your grains on Passover is, it actually doesn't mean you have to throw away your grains, because you're not allowed to use grains on Passover, so therefore let's say your property right in those grains is pretty minimal, and therefore it can be nullified simply by declaring that the grain is no longer yours, and then it can stay in your cupboard because it's not your grain. And stuff like this, and it's all bullshit. It's all just like finding the loopholes in the law. And basically the message is that the law can be whatever you want as long as you're clever enough. And that's their approach to the law. And they sustain this by a variety of this caustic debate, this hair-splitting, this Byzantine hair-splitting style of disputation, where you just, you overwhelm an adversary by throwing out as many fallacies as you possibly can in a shorter period of time to raise the cost of refutation. And it's training to lie. That's what's taught in these yeshiva or religious schools, is how to lie. and how to do so effectively. So there's a lot of similarities between these methods: feminine means of coercion, which are like emotional and social techniques of manipulation, and Pilpul, the dishonest Jewish style of disputation by fallacy, and by overwhelming your opponent with fallacies to raise the cost of refutation. And there's a lot of reasons, why these styles are similar. The Jews are a characteristically effeminate race, and the females are a characteristically Jewish sex, and they share the trait of weakness, and in the case of females being the weaker sex and Jews always being a minority in a predominantly other context, predominantly Goyish context, and so they don't hold the upper hand, and so they resort to these kind of stratagems. And as a result, we've seen that feminism since the second wave is predominantly Jewish, and a lot of the leading feminists have been Jewish, and so on and so forth. So it's really no surprise and no coincidence that these methods are related or similar in some way. And the problem with employing these methods is there's only really 4 ways anybody can react. You can submit to them, and you can accept the conclusion of the feminist or the Pilpulist, which is not usually going to be in your interest, because if it were in your interest, they could find some honest way of persuading you to adopt it. Or you can react in kind, right? You can employ the same methods in return, or escalate, let's say ridicule or mockery or shaming or dishonest argumentation. Trolling is what we call it. White Pilpul is trolling, and that's what the alt-right does. We troll the shit out of these people to fuck with them and waste their time and get them riled up, because they're not honest people. They're not engaging in good faith debate. They are not they're not honestly accounting for the costs and benefits of what they propose, etc., etc. So we troll the shit out of them. And that's one method. So you can relent, you can accept or submit to these conclusions or these demands. You can respond in kind. You can disassociate and just have nothing to do with these people. And oftentimes this is going to be necessary, because these people are not worth associating with. They're not worth cooperating with. They're all cost and no benefit. And so that's frequently where it ends up. And if you're responding to them in kind, that's frequently where it ends up too, because it just emphasizes that we're not cooperating, we're not on the same page, we're not trying to come to an agreement, we're not negotiating for a win-win or a mutually beneficial settlement. And so when you respond to them in kind to get them riled up, or to waste their time, or to waste their energy, frequently just ends in disassociation, which is better than nothing. It's better than some outcomes that could occur. Or you can respond with violence, and ultimately that's what we're going to have to do, is respond with violence to these people, because the cost of tolerating this kind of behavior, whether from women or from Jews or social justice warriors or belligerent minorities, is just too great. Like, we can't keep tolerating this, because even if we don't accept it, even if we don't submit to it, it's just a fucking nuisance, and it's unproductive, and it takes up a lot of time and energy and resources. But some people are going to submit to it and either be convinced by it or just submit to it out of expediency. So that imposes a cost on everyone too, because now they're on the wrong side. So there's no point in tolerating it, and it's something we're ultimately going to have to suppress with violence, because violence can be an honest means of communicating. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize, because ultimately skill in violence, or ability in violence, or the possession of a preponderance of violent means does depend upon productive virtues, upon truthful virtues. That's all I have to say about that.